How to end the damage of the sequester that continues to go on. Should Congress worry about the strategy, or should they provide relief as quickly as they did for airline passengers? Joining me now, Congresswoman Renee Ellmers, Republican of North Carolina. She sponsored the Cancer Patient Protection Act as an immediate fix to cancer clinic cuts. And Congresswoman, thank you for joining me. And I'll begin by asking you what inspired you to introduce this piece of legislation.
Well, interestingly enough, Chris, I had a visit to my area community cancer center in Dunn, North Carolina very recently, and learned about the cuts that were going to go into effect and how devastating they would be. And then, of course, as of April 1st, that is when they actually went into effect. And, you know, I just immediately reached out to my staff so that we could put this piece of legislation together, knowing how important it was to take care of those cancer patients.
What was your reaction to the FAA vote fix last week?
Well, I have to admit, I, like so many, were saying, you know, this is a very important issue. We don't want people waiting in lines in airports. But at the same time, when we have cancer patients who are vulnerable and need our help, I really thought that that should have been the place that we should have gone first.
So you did vote for the FAA fix.
I did, because there again, very important piece of legislation, but there again, cancer patients,
but
much
I agree.
more important.
Okay, you and I are absolutely on the same page. I think probably every single viewer in America right now is on the same page about the relative importance. But here's the problem. You got an inconvenient problem in the FAA. You've got a less inconvenient problem in an 82-year-old woman who's got to go 60 miles now to get her chemotherapy. In voting to fix the FAA, haven't you given leverage to get that woman her chemotherapy? Isn't that just going to languish there now that the thing that everyone said was the most pressing problem, which you yourself voted to fix, has been fixed?
Well, no, actually, I think it actually helps our cause, because now that we've seen that we can actually vote, you know, in Congress, we have the ability to instruct the agencies on how they use these sequester cuts and how they have some flexibility. So that actually bolsters the issue, and that helps me to get more co-sponsors on this bill. We're up to 60 now.
If it bolsters the issue, and again, I think everyone who's watching this is probably in agreement that this should not be happening. If it bolsters it, then it seems to bolster other things. I mean, are you going to say that kids should be kicked out of Head Start? I want to play you a little bit of a sound of a senior, a 70-year-old resident in Virginia who decided to remove himself from his local Meals on Wheels program preemptively in order to make sure people more needy would be able to eat. Take a listen to this for a second.
I've run into people who have been a whole lot worse off than I was. And some of them were living here. Some have passed on. Some have moved away. And I just couldn't bear the thought of me having something to eat and maybe somebody else needed it and they couldn't apply for it. So I just voluntarily gave it up.
Now, that's an incredibly menschy thing to do. The question to you, as a member of Congress who voted for the FAA bill, who sponsored this, is what do you have to say to the folks on Meals on Wheels? What do you have to say to the kids in Head Start?
Well, number one, I've helped out with Meals on Wheels myself in my own community, and yes, Head Start is a very important issue as well. I've met with individuals in my district as I've been home, finding out if these cuts are going into effect. The danger is there. They know they're prepared for possibility of furloughs of staff, but they've not happened yet in my district.
Sure.
Now, the point being, 2 cents of every federal dollar was cut from our budget. We need to put the spending cuts in place. We borrow $3.8 billion every day to fund the federal government. It's up to the agencies to act appropriately, to put the cuts in place that are smart, not harm individuals.
But the statutory language that the agencies have to deal with is that the cuts have to be across the board. And that was the language that was worked out between the President and the Republican Congress, which everybody jumped in the pool together. So it seems to me that the problem is you turn around and you say these folks aren't getting chemotherapy, this is an outrage, but it is related to the government. Those 2 cents you just held up, some of those cents are going to people getting chemo drugs, and that's the whole point, that when you cut, there are real effects.
Well, the thing of it is that's why across-the-board cuts are never a good idea. That's why we voted for twice sequester replacement bills in the House.
But across the court,
we know that that's very dangerous because we affect the good with of that.
Congresswoman Renee Ellmers, thank you so much for joining me tonight. I really appreciate it. Let's bring in Congressman Chris Van Hollen of Maryland, ranking Democrat.